Welcome to a new installment of Look and Listen, our monthly online exploration of the intersections of Asian art and music. I'm Keith Wilson, curator of ancient Chinese art at the Freer and Sackler Galleries, which together form the National Museum of Asian Art at the Smithsonian. In this episode, we're focusing on a classical Chinese stringed instrument, the qin, which has long been played in solitude or with a like-minded friend or two. We'll be looking at Daoist and Confucian influences on the music for the qin, and how this music seeks inspiration from the forces of nature and the inner spiritual world of the individual. At the same time, you'll see Chinese paintings that relate to qin-playing and take a close look at the oldest qin instrument in any U.S. museum. I'm joined today from Bellingham, Washington, by renowned scholar and performer of the qin, Bell Yung, who is affiliate professor of music at the University of Washington and the author of Celestial Arts of Antiquity, Music of the Seven-String Zither of China. Let's start with our first piece of music. And for that, I turn things over to Bell Yung.
Thank you, Keith. I'm going to play a short composition called A Fine Evening from the early 17th century. There's a text attached to it. The sky is high, the air is crisp, the moon clear, the stars bright. It is time to play the qin and appreciate the Tao. The Tao refers to Taoism. To drink wine and to recite poetry.
Thank you, Bell, for giving us our first taste of the qin and its music with that rendition of A Fine Evening. During Bell's performance, you saw an anonymous 16th or 17th century painting that provides a classic view of a solitary gentleman, maybe a retired scholar official or a cultivated hermit, seated with his qin in a shaded setting beside a refreshing pool. This image reminds us that the instrument is not typically played in musical ensembles, but most often by itself. Relatively small and lightweight, it's easily portable, allowing it to be carried to isolated natural settings where the performer can sit outdoors and accompany the sounds of his surroundings. In fact, nature and the natural sound environment figure prominently in the qin repertoire. The musical inspiration offered by nature returns in a second painting featuring the qin. Focusing on two figures enjoying wine in a spare landscape setting, this page comes from an 18th century album depicting a whole series of illustrious cultural heroes from China's past. Knowledgeable viewers easily recognize the subject of this particular page, Yu Boya, a renowned musician, and Zhong Ziqi, a famed qin aficionado. These two semi-legendary figures are said to have lived about 2,400 years ago. Tradition states that Boya's first teacher selected an unorthodox method to introduce him to the importance of nature for musical inspiration. That teacher, Changlian, told Boya he wanted to introduce him to the most important instructor to help Boya with his music. Professing to do just that, Cheng took Boya by boat to Penglai, the Isle of the Immortals, and promptly left him there. Boya waited and waited, but the promised teacher never arrived. As days passed, Boya opened his ears and his heart to the natural sounds around him. The flowing water, the crashing waves, calling birds, and hushed valleys. Soon, he was playing tunes that were more expressive than ever before, realizing that the greatest teacher Changlian had promised was nature itself. The figure shown with Boya in this painting is not his first teacher, but a spirit mate associated with an incident much later in Boya's life, which explains the advanced age of both men. The image illustrates a time when Boya was caught in a sudden downpour while traveling by boat. Forced to delay his journey, he took out his qin and began to play. After some time, the weather cleared, but he sensed that someone was listening to him. Leaving the boat, he found the woodcutter, Zhong Ziqi, seated nearby, wanting to hear more. Boya began to play again for Ziqi, the figure with his back to us in the painting. It soon became apparent that the listener had an uncanny ability to understand the inspiration and the meaning behind each of the melodies he heard Boya play that day. They became fast friends and agreed to meet again. Sadly, when Boya returned later, he learned that Ziqi had died. In great sorrow, Boya destroyed his instrument after playing one last tune at Ziqi's tomb. The story not only exemplifies the Chinese ideal of a close and sympathetic friendship forged through music some 2,400 years ago, it also suggests the great age of the qin instrument itself. In fact, Chinese archaeologists have unearthed a number of lacquered wood qin that can be dated to the 4th or 5th century BCE, roughly the time when Boya and Zhong Ziqi are thought to have lived. Now, Bell is going to show us his instrument, which dates to the 17th century. I've also asked him to describe how it's played.
Thank you, Keith. The instrument qin has been around for 2,000 years and played almost exclusively by the elite class of scholar officials. The body is basically a long, flat wooden box, the entire surface lacquered. There are 7 strings and they are made of silk normally. The basic playing technique is the right hand fingers pluck the string while the left hand fingers press down the string or slide along the string or touch it lightly to produce harmonic tones. Along one edge of the instrument are 13 inlaid markers to guide the left-hand fingers. The instrument I'm playing here was made in 1640. Its name is Pines in 10,000 Valleys. And the name in Chinese, of course, is carved on the back side. It's these 3 characters, Pines in 10,000 Valleys. The qin has its own musical notation. It instructs the player on which string to pluck and how to plug it, which finger to plug it, where to stop the string with the left hand, and which finger is used to stop it, and many other symbols for more complicated plucking and sliding techniques. It doesn't indicate pitches or duration. The 150 or so extant notation books date from the 14th century onward, after printing became widely used. I want to show you a notation book from 1425, among the oldest one, and one of the pieces inside, which I'll play later, is called Wine Madness, and this is the first page of Wine Madness. You read it as if you are reading Chinese linguistic text from right to left and then from up to down on each column. In this example, the first column is the title, Wine Madness, and columns 2 to 6 is a preface explaining what this music is about. Then the musical notation begins in column 7. The first symbol is the Chinese character 1 to show that this is section 1 of the piece, followed by another Chinese character meaning madly, and it's another heading for this section. Then the third symbol is the actual notation, and it means that the right hand ring finger plucking the third string, the open string, inward. So it will be like this. Then the next symbol is a little more complicated. It is the left hand finger stopping string number 6 at marker 9. See, I cannot read, yes. With the right hand index finger plucking this same string 6 outward. Then the next symbol tells us to lift the left hand finger, which produces an open string note. So these 3 symbols adding together will sound like this.
Thank you, Belle, for that fascinating introduction to your instrument and to its playing techniques and Chinese musical notation systems. Now, I'd like to share a very special instrument in the Freer Gallery of Art collection. Its undulating profile is notably different from more typical designs that have angular notches along the 2 sides. On its upper face, you see the 7 strings pass over the bridge, located at the player's right, and wrap around the end of the instrument at the left. The 13 circular hui, marking the harmonic nodes, are inlaid with gold. When the instrument is turned over, the bottom reveals the 7 fine jade tuning pegs beneath the bridge and 2 short jade feet near the opposite end. You also see the 2 openings of the sound box and a series of important inscriptions. The 4 characters carved at the neck name the instrument, reading Ku Mu Long Yin, or Weathered Wood, the Dragon's Roar. This name has Chan Buddhist connotations. Lower down, flanking the larger sound box, are inscribed the quatrain of 4 character lines that convey poetic references to music. These close-up views of the instrument also give us a good look at the cracking of the lacquer, showing the passage of time since it was applied to the exterior of the wooden instrument. This pattern is the natural result of the aging of the surface and is especially appreciated by qin connoisseurs, who describe it as resembling the scales of a snake's belly. In fact, it is this characteristic that encouraged many specialists to identify this qin as a particularly early example. But opinions have long varied about the true age of the instrument. A few years ago, the qin master and music historian Yang Yuanzhang at the University of Hong Kong encouraged the museum to perform a series of scientific examinations on the instrument, including CT scans, X-rays, and infrared imaging, to see if the actual age of Dragon's Roar could be determined once and for all. Sure enough, infrared images revealed a brush-written inscription on the interior that had faded to near invisibility with age. That inscription provided the exact date of 1009, which makes the instrument over 1,000 years old and identifies Dragon's Roar as one of the few surviving classical qin anywhere in the world that is datable to the Tang or early Song dynasties. All of this scientific research is explained in a brand new book that's devoted to a study of all 7 of the classical qin in the Freer and Sackler collections. Written by Professor Yang, this authoritative book promises to become the new standard publication on the subject of Chinese qin. It's entitled Dragon's Roar, Chinese Literati Musical Instruments in the Freer and Sackler collections, and can be purchased through University of Chicago Press. It's also available on Amazon. Now, let's turn back to Bell to hear a piece called Wild Geese Descending on a Sandbank. You'll also be looking at a painting of the same title from the museum's collection. Both date to the 17th century.
Thank you, Keith. The earliest notation of wild geese landing on Sandbank dates to 1643. It is subsequently found in 56 later notation books, the largest number among compositions, which shows how popular this composition has been. Qin music normally does not directly imitate sounds, so do not expect flapping of wings or cries of birds. The music merely paints a mood. Imagine in the wilderness untouched by human hand, the wild geese fly and rest freely in peace and tranquility, a manifestation of the Daoist ideal of nature. Now I'll turn over to Keith again.
I hope the music and painting combine to transport you to a wild sandbank on a distant river with geese flying in to land. The painting you just saw was made by the late Ming artist Sheng Maoye, who lived in the city of Suzhou, which was, throughout the Ming Dynasty, China's foremost cultural hub. It was famed for its gardens, lush landscape, and mild climate, and became the favored destination of poets, painters, and other members of cultivated society. In these circles, qin masters were highly respected and in great demand for refined social gatherings. One such qin master is the subject of our next painting, a particularly poignant one in the Freer Gallery collection. It's easy to overlook him in this scroll painted in ink on paper. Here he is, a robed figure riding a donkey. He's followed by a servant who carries an umbrella and a qin wrapped in cloth. What an odd image. What does it mean? The title, as well as inscriptions written at the end of the scroll, conveys something of the artist's inspiration. The scroll was produced in 1505 by a group of famous poets, painters, and scholars who gathered to send off their friend, Qin Master Yang, as he was leaving Suzhou to relocate to Nanjing, known today as Nanking, the southern capital of the Ming court. Yang's move was both practical and strategic. He was seeking a larger audience and a more lucrative base of patrons at his new destination. Painted by the well-known artist Tang Yin, the scroll concludes with inscriptions brushed by Tang and 9 other famous calligraphers, several alluding to great qin players of the past, including the ancient Voya, whom we encountered near the beginning of this program. By combining image with words, the scroll served as a celebration of a circle of friends, as well as a snapshot of a particular moment in the life of one of its members. It also served as a kind of letter of reference for the new audiences Yang would encounter in Nanking. The painting clearly focuses on the road ahead. Perhaps it's my imagination, but I sense in this image a mixture of the excitement and anxiety that comes from moving to a new city. Most important, the painting reflects the fame as well as the respect that a classical qin master could achieve in cultivated society. We've seen how the qin and its music were associated with the loftiest of aesthetic aspirations and cultural sensitivities, but it could also be linked with emotional abandon. We're going to close this program by raising a toast, as it were, with music and art on the theme of wine. And for that, I turn it back to Belle.
Thanks, Keith. Drinking is a theme of several well-known compositions, showing again the influence of Daoism. I'm going to play one called Wine Madness, the result of having a little too much. From a notation book dated 1425, one that I showed you earlier, its preface says that this composition is by Ranji, a poet and musician among the celebrated 7 sages of the bamboo grove of the 3rd century. Ranji lamented that the Tao was lost, so he felt alienated from his time. Therefore, he put away worldly concerns and relied upon indulgence in wine as his purpose for living. He declared that the reason for drinking was not the wine itself, but that through wine the Tao was found again.
I imagine you've never heard music about drinking wine that sounded anything like that. Maybe the next time you pour yourself a glass, you'll conjure up the sound of the qin and the hauntingly humorous drunken poets. You can hear more of Bell Jung's playing and commentary on our podcast of his appearance at the museum in 2016. Just go to asia.si.edu and search for Bell Jung. I really appreciate you taking time to travel on this wonderful journey with me today. I'm Keith Wilson, and I thank you for listening and thank you for looking. Be well, and see you next time.